The moments in your life are special. Are you saving them the right way? Today, you can capture anything you desire with your camera. But there was a time when Kodak was a reliable brand that captured your memories with proper colors. Back in the day, Kodak made the best cameras. People have talked about the Kodak moment for years. These are the big events in your life that you never want to forget. When someone had to shoot at family events, parties, and weddings to remember them. That meant getting more Kodak film, of course. For decades, they were the best photographers in the world. People often get Kodak's story wrong. It's not true that they didn't pay attention to digital pictures. They were really into the technology. Then why did they fail? To understand Kodak's story, we need to go back a long time to May 23, 1892. Kodak has been around for a long time. The company started with George Eastman. Eastman teamed up with a businessman named Henry Strong in 1880. They began the Eastman Dry Plate Company together on January 1, 1881. Strong was the leader, and Eastman was in charge of the money as the cashier. Their business name tells you what they sold: dry plates. Unless you know a lot about photography, you would have probably never heard of dry plates. It wasn't as easy to take pictures in the past as it is now. Before the film, people used photography plates. The silver salts on these plates made them sensitive to light, and they were usually on thin glass. It was a pain that the older wet plates had to be developed right away. But then dry plates came along and were a huge step forward because you didn't have to rush to process them right away. They were better than what we have now, but they were a big step forward at the time. George Eastman thought there had to be a better way, even though dry plates made things safer. It was hard to move around with glass plates because they were big and heavy. He looked into roll film, which was also known as cartridge film because it had a shape like a shotgun shell. In fact, a farmer from Wisconsin named Peter Houston made the first roll film camera in 1881. Eastman thought this new way of taking shots could be very useful. Eastman had been making movies better on his own for a long time. His business, which used to be called Eastman Dry Plate and Film Company, was always getting bigger. He and William Walker made the first useful film roll stand in 1885. He got a copyright for a type of paper film that same year and called it American film. But he wasn't done yet. He hired a chemist named Henry Reichenbach to help him make it even better. It took a lot of trying, but in 1889, they finally made a new kind of film called nitrocellulose film. It was a big step forward. There was nothing like it before, and as the movie got better, the business grew. As the business grew, it changed its name a few times. After much thought, they chose the name Eastman Company in November 1889. But the film wasn't enough on its own. People needed cameras to use it. Eastman also worked on making cameras. He got a patent for the first Kodak camera in 1888. It was a simple box camera with a lens that didn't move. There was no lens. Instead, there were two V-shaped guides on top that helped you aim. It had a roll of film that could take 100 shots and cost $25. At the time, this was a pretty good deal. The trouble was that there weren't many places in the area that could develop film, so people couldn't just take their film to one. That's why Eastman set up a way for people to send their camera and $10 to his offices in Rochester. His team would process the film, send the images and pictures back, and then put new film in the camera. This idea worked really well. The slogan for the business was, "You press the button, we do the rest." And it really did work. After more business growth, the company changed its name again on May 23, 1892. It changed its name to Eastman Kodak this time. As time went on, though, most people just called it Kodak, and that's what stuck. The business grew very quickly after the release of their first cameras and film. Eastman quickly learned, though, that film, not cameras, was what made him money. Cameras were bought just once, but the film had to be bought over and over. So he didn't worry about other companies making cameras. Instead, he focused on running the movie business. He also sold things other than film. He set the prices just right so he could make a lot of money without making people stop buying. Kodak's work culture was amazing. They took care of their workers. In 1910, they set up charity funds to help workers who got hurt on the job, which was pretty unusual at the time. They had a profit-sharing plan in place by 1920 that let every worker share in the company's success. The founder, George Eastman, even gave his workers a lot of his own shares at a discount in 1919, making them feel like they owned the business. Kodak kept Eastman's ideas alive even after he retired. Life insurance, disability payments, and retirement plans were all launched in 1928. These were amazing things, even by today's standards. They were almost unknown back then. This made everyone want to work at Kodak. Even better, the company really needed the most skilled workers, and they wanted to work there. Other businesses in Rochester used to do things the same way Kodak did them. In order to keep workers, they raised pay and made perks better. It was George Eastman's idea that this was the best way to run a business. It was fair and good for business, too. He was afraid of labor groups and thought that being nice to workers would keep them away. He paid them more than a union job would. So why would they even want to join one? It's a good business with happy staff and no strikes or unions. He was right, to be honest. Eastman was still very much a man of his time, though, which isn't so great. There was no chance for people of color, Jews, or even Catholics. Yes, not even Catholics were allowed. This meant that many people, even white ones, were left out. Still, Eastman did hire women. About 1/3 of the people who worked at Kodak were women. He also believed that families should work together. If your dad worked at Kodak, you probably could too. It wasn't just a fancy way for him to say it, but it made the company feel like a real family. He was, without a doubt, being pretty biased while he was building this industrial family. But that was back in the 1920s. At that time, no one really spoke out against these ways of hiring. Things did not start to change until after World War II. A lot of people changed their minds about Jewish neighborhoods after the Holocaust, and the Civil Rights Movement gave Black Americans more chances. In the United States, Kodak really took off after World War II. It became cool to have your own camera when people had more money. As cameras got better, more people wanted a film for business pictures, family photos, and even government photos. They even made cameras that NASA used in space. Their staff doubled between 1936 and 1966, and they were nice to their workers. They made sure their workers were happy, paid them more than their competitors, and gave them bonuses. Things were great for people who worked at Kodak. They didn't have to make many changes until the 1970s because the business was so good. But the new tech was coming out quickly. There were more and more computers around, and Kodak wasn't sure how to use them in their business. Computers didn't need film, and digital cameras would not need film either if they got big. Kodak stuck to what they were good at, which was film. Polaroid and Xerox were also making quick cameras and copiers at the same time. Kodak tried to compete, but their copies didn't do well, so in the 1990s they stopped making them. After that, in 1975, Stephen Sasson, an engineer at Kodak, made the first digital camera that could be carried around. Even though it was a big step forward, digital cameras didn't use film. Kodak knew this could be bad for business, so they didn't go ahead with the plan. They knew that digital cameras would beat them one day, but they weren't ready to switch. Lawrence Matan, another Kodak worker, even wrote a paper in 1979 saying that photography would be completely digital by 2010. Kodak knew what the future held back in the day. Now people laugh because they think they missed the digital wave, but that's not what happened. The real issue was they were afraid to get in each other's way. At that time, it didn't seem like a good idea to sell a digital camera. For sure, Stephen Sasson made the first digital camera, but it was huge, like a toaster. A picture could only be taken once every 20 seconds, and it wasn't even close to being as good as film. You also had to go through a lot of trouble to connect it to a TV so you could see the pictures. It was 1975. Computers weren't the way they are now. They were very big, and the screens on them couldn't show pictures. You couldn't just connect a camera, move the pictures, and print them. It was just that the technology wasn't ready yet. Kodak had the technology, but it would have been very risky for them to use it right away. They would have to spend a lot of money, and their own movie business would suffer. Besides that, they would have to go up against businesses that were already very good at computers. Kodak wasn't ready for that fight. Kodak wasn't dumb. They knew that cameras would be used in the future. Their study labs worked on digital technology all through the 1980s. They were preparing the way for a smooth move into the digital age. But by the time they were ready, someone else was already in charge. Kodak was already going through big changes when the market opened up. Digital shooting wasn't lost on the company. The real issue was the competition. A lot of it came from Japan. Japanese companies were coming into the US market, and Fujifilm was one of their biggest threats to Kodak. You may have seen their name before. When they came to the US in the 1980s, they had a big advantage. They were cheap, their movie was still good, but it didn't cost as much. That was it. Fujifilm won a bidding war and was chosen to be the official picture company for the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. That was really important. It made them a big name in the US market, taking away some of Kodak's market share. Fuji even built a plant in the US and used strong advertising and price cuts to get people to switch from Kodak to Fuji. In 1997, they had 17% of the market, up from 10% in 1990. For the movie business, that might not seem like a big deal, but it was. Meanwhile, Kodak didn't focus on coming up with new ideas. Instead, they listened to their owners and did things that were unpopular, like cutting worker perks and letting people go. Sure, people get fired sometimes, but taking away perks from those who stayed? That will only lead to trouble. Also, workers were mad. Even though Kodak made more money in the 1990s, Fuji kept taking away more of its market share. In 1997, Kodak also tried to get people to buy from them again by lowering their prices, but that cost them a lot of money. That year, they lost more than $1 billion more than the year before. Kodak entered the digital regime in the 1990s. Kodak's CEO, Kay Whitmore, said they were going to restructure in 1993, but later that same year, he was replaced by George Fisher, a tech-savvy Motorola employee. Kodak started to move toward digital photography by cutting back on their chemistry business. He knew that digital was the way of the future. Film sales finally started to go down in 2001, and Daniel Karp, Kodak's new CEO, put a lot of effort into going digital when they came out with the EasyShare camera line, and it did very well. So it's not completely true that Kodak didn't care about digital and stuck with film until it was too late. They knew what was going on, but how did they deal with competition and their own problems? That's what hurt them the most. Before we solve this mystery, if you are enjoying this video, you can appreciate our efforts by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your simple gestures can keep us going for long. Back to the topic. 2005 was a great year for Kodak. They sold more digital cameras than anyone else in the US. Even though things looked like they were going well, there were big problems going on below the surface. In the past, they lost a lot of money because they made bad bets. Selling digital cameras was very different from selling film cameras. People kept buying more films. But once someone got a digital camera, they didn't need much else. Not only did they get less return business, but they also made a lot less money because there was so much competition. There were a lot of companies that made digital cameras, and Kodak was one of them. Kodak was the first company to make cameras, but then Canon, Sony, and Nikon came out with cameras that were just as good, but cheaper. Kodak had dropped to 4th place in the market by 2007. The real bad thing was still yet to come. Digital cameras were about to stop being useful, and they were not ready for the iPhone. Everything changed when Apple came along. People no longer had to carry around a separate camera because their phones already had a good one built in. These days, most people don't even bother to think about getting a digital camera because their phones have such great photos. There was trouble at Kodak. They lost a lot of money. Antonio Perez, who was CEO, starting closing down plants, sending work to other companies, and even getting out of the film camera business completely. Of the 50,000 people they fired between 2004 and 2007, 13 plants and 130 photo processing sites were shut down. They quit selling Kodachrome film in 2009 after making it for 74 years. Perez didn't just cut things, though. He was trying to save Kodak by going in a new way. He had a big bet on printers. He thought Kodak could make money there because people still needed printers. But it was a dangerous move since there were already a lot of printer companies out there. Kodak, on the other hand, was ready. Printer companies used a sneaky method for many years. They sold cheap printers but charged astronomical amounts for ink. Sense a pattern? Kodak had used the same plan when they made the film. But now Kodak changed things. Their ink was much less expensive than the other brands, but their printers were more expensive. A lot of people who were sick of paying too much for ink heard about that. The question was whether it was too late for Kodak to make a comeback. At one point, Kodak had a pretty good plan. People were more ready to buy their slightly more expensive printers because they didn't charge too much for their refills. It saved users money in the long run. By 2011, it looked like this plan would finally work, and Kodak was almost making money in that market. Then 2012 came along, and sales went down again. That was the last straw for their customer printer business, and they had to shut it down for good. Things had been bad for a while as the company's value kept going down. In 2009, they needed to borrow $300 million from KKR to keep going. They started selling off different parts of their business all over the place to try to get their money back from deals that didn't work out. The company had to get rid of everything, even its health business, but they did make $2.35 billion from the sale, which helped them pay off about $1.15 billion in fixed-term debt. As things got worse, Kodak tried something new. They sued over rights. They made $838 million in 2010 from licensing deals, such as a settlement with LG. They had a messy court case with Apple over patents from 2010 to 2012. They did bring in some cash, but the lawyers' fees took most of it. By 2011, they were quickly running out of cash. They only had $957 million left in June of that year. It seems like a lot, right? But for a business that size, it was a big red flag. In 2001, 10 years ago, they had $1.6 billion, which dropped quickly. To get cash quickly, they tried to sell or license their huge number of patents, but experts could see what was coming. By 2012, they were saying that bankruptcy was going to happen, and they were right. The exact date that Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection was January 19th, 2012. Citigroup gave them a $950 million credit line so they could keep running, but they had to turn in a reorganization plan by February 15th, 2013. A lot of people got lost here in the story. Many people thought that Kodak's demise was the end of the company. Kodak didn't just disappear. In fact, they turned in their plan for restructuring early, in January 2013. They had to sell off a lot of rights and stop making a few goods in order to stay in business. On September 3rd, 2013, they were no longer in bankruptcy, but they were not even close to what they used to be. Instead of working on consumers, they changed their attention to business imaging technology. Kodak had a lot of jobs in Rochester, New York, and this change had a big effect on that city. When those well-paying Kodak jobs went away, they were replaced by jobs that paid less, which made more people poor. You will be surprised to know that Kodak is still alive, believe it or not. In 2016, they finally reported their first profit for the year since going bankrupt. These days, selling their name is how they make the most money. For as long as people still know Kodak, they let other companies use the name on their goods and get paid license fees. In 2018, they tried to get into cryptocurrency strangely with Kodak Coin and a mining rig called Kodak Cash Miner. I guess you already know these efforts didn't pay the company much. Kodak made a huge mistake. They chose badly, but that's their own story, so let's not talk about that now. They're still around, that's what matters. Along with licensing deals and company changes, they still make movies, just like they always have. In this day and age, that may seem strange, but some people still want it. The movie business still needs it, and Kodak is the company that gives it to them. They made deals with big companies in 2015 and 2020 to keep film alive. By 2022, they were even hiring new film techs because film photography was becoming popular again. Do you think Kodak stands any chance to make its place back in the world today? Share your opinions in the comment section below. If you would like to see a video on any particular business, mention it in the comment section. We will take it from there. Till then, you can out our already existing videos. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. See you soon in another video.